This is fast money. And let's talk about money very quickly and markets. It was another record day on Wall Street. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq closing at more all-time highs. So let's trade this. Guy Adami, it is so odd sometimes to be in this business because on one hand, we're watching the disaster in Afghanistan as the last U.S. troops leave and the Taliban takes over with a couple of hundred Americans left behind. We've got a disaster in Louisiana with the storm, and yet the markets, they just shrug it off and continue to move higher.
Yeah, and that's been the case for quite some time. We talk about it all the time. We try not to mix in politics, and we're very careful in our language. We understand you use the word heartbreak, absolutely, and the devastation to our fellow citizens in the Gulf Coast. It's heartbreaking, but what we're tasked to do is try to figure out what the market's up to, and to a certain extent, we do a decent job on some nights, and I know for a fact not so well on others. But I'll say this, as we get to month end, the money continues to flow in. Passive investing continues to be the theme, a market that's impervious to any bad news. Some of the headlines you just mentioned, and the beat goes on. September, historically an odd month, we'll see. But until then, there's no reason to try to fade this thing.
Yeah, Tim Seymour, would you agree with that?
I would. I get concerned by the calendar month of September. I get concerned at the VIX at 16 and really where it's plunged since, Fed minutes and then Jackson Hole. And I'll always say more Fed equals more volatility. So I think, we've had a lot of reasons to, at least throw, as Guy refers to, the passive, asset flows. I mean, look at the move in Apple today, 3% move in the world's largest company. Look at the move in Amazon. Look at, some of the mega cap tech names are places, though. You had a rally today that gave you some sense of, yes, the markets are confident we're at all-time highs. But if you look at transports, you look at value orientation, you look at industrials, and you look at places where you really are relying on growth and a Fed staying out of the way longer. And those are sectors that continue to be under a bit of trouble. I know we've had this rotation back and forth, but as we look towards September, that's really where I think the jury is out, because a day when the biggest companies in the world by far controlled today's market flow, most of the market was flat or down.
Yeah, it was. And that is an amazing point, I think, Dan, that Tim is making about Apple. You look at Apple, you don't see 3% days on the world's biggest company with really no new. I mean, we could talk about the iPhone 17 or whatever one is next, Dan. Do you see any sign that this incredible money flow into the biggest of the big companies is going to slow down anytime soon?
Yeah, I think Tim just kind of mentioned it. It really does have a lot to do with rates and growth expectations. We saw this in Q1 of this year when rates were much lower, and we saw a rotation into more cyclically sensitive, GDP sensitive names. We've seen it back and forth. Rates down, you go into these growth names because you have a growth fair. And then when rates go higher, you want to be in the more GDP sensitive names. Listen, Apple's been consolidating here for a few weeks. It just broke out. There was a piece of fundamental news. To me, when I see this sort of price action in Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Facebook, to me, it seems a bit defensive. I tried to make a case why I thought stocks might go lower. It's about a week and a half ago on the same show that Tom Lee of Fundstrat came on and said we are about to have a melt up and everything rally. He was clearly right here. I tried to fade that. If you look at the Nasdaq 100, look at this chart that we have going back nearly a year from the September 2nd, 2020 high. The only thing I will tell you, though, is that from that high, the Nasdaq dropped about 14% in a straight line in September. The last time it got back up to that trend line, it dropped about 13%. Where did we stop today? Maybe only because the market closed, but as Carter Braxton Worth would say, to the penny of that trend line. So maybe September is going to be a bit ugly here in the markets. Maybe expectations have gotten high, and the plowing into these major defensive tech names is probably not that bullish right here.
Yeah, BK, I mean, you look at the worst performing stocks in the S&P 500, they kind of have something in common. It was Capital One, Discover. It was basically credit card companies, consumer spending. It was airlines like Delta and United. Phil LeBeau saying that we're seeing kind of a slowdown in the growth of new plane tickets being bought as well. And it was some of the cruise lines. It does kind of appear that the bad performers today are the people that are still scared about the economy going forward and maybe what that says about September.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look at the signal from the market, right? People, what do investors want to buy? They want to buy idiosyncratic growth. So that tells you that the implication of that is there's not going to be the economic growth that we thought there was going to be. And it looks like we had this reopening burst where everybody who hasn't traveled for a year, haven't flown for a year, they did it all. Now it's over. Look at airline prices as you go into September and October. Those are rolling over. It's a lot cheaper to fly. You can find a seat. Airlines cutting capacity. They're not seeing that demand. So we are in this low to slow growth environment. The bond market told you that. The yields went down today. We're seeing an uptick in inflation. But what investors want for now is the Nasdaq stocks, that idiosyncratic growth. To me, it feels very frothy, but it also feels like it's going to be a melt up. Every single strategist that I'm reading and talking to is saying, yeah, we're going to melt up, but maybe something could go wrong in September, October. It seems to me like the path of least resistance is this kind of scary melt up.